So I want to talk a little bit about tire wear. Now, there's a number of things that can happen to tires that are caused by different things. So one of the things that you may see is tire wearing in the center. So I don't know if you can get up there with the tire. So if the tire is worn only in the center of the tread, that usually indicates overinflation. So you've overinflated that tire, and instead of sitting like this, you've pushed it up like a bubble, and it's running on the center, and it wears right in the center, okay? If you get tire wear on both outsides, that's usually underinflation. So underinflation will actually pull that tire in like this, and it runs on the two outsides and wears evenly on both outsides. Sometimes you'll see a tire that's worn only on one side, okay? So it's only worn on this side or only worn on that side, and that's usually an alignment issue, okay? So usually it's a camber issue. Camber means whether the tire is sitting like this, which is positive, or this, which is negative. And if it sits too much like this, it rubs on the inside. If it sits too much like this, it rubs on the outside. So that's something that would need to be changed with an alignment, which we won't get into today, but you should be able to assess that by looking at tires and say, hey, you know what? This probably needs an alignment. Now, the other common thing that happens with tires is what we call scalloping or cupping. And we get this wavy pattern on the outside of the tire. It'll actually kind of, you run your hand on it, instead of being smooth like this, it's kind of got these bumps, all right? Now what happens is the tire is doing this, and it's shaking as it goes down the road. So when it shakes this way, it takes a little bit of rubber there, and then it shakes back this way, it takes a little bit of rubber on the other side, and you get these wavy, bumpy patterns, okay? Now be careful when you do rub your hand on a tire. If it's really worn out and the wires are showing, you can cut and poke yourself really easily. So make sure there's some tread there before you do that assessment on your tires. And that's something you can easily do as a practical, is just go out and assess your tires. Do you have any abnormal wear on any of the tires of your vehicles? And if so, what do you think the cause is? So this cupping and this scalloping can be caused by a couple things. It could be the tire out of balance, right? And what we mean by out of balance is one of two things. We can have a static out of balance, so we have a whole bunch of extra weight on one part of the tire, or we can have a dynamic out of balance where we've got some extra weight on this part of the tire and then a different part of the tire on the other side, on a different plane. And what happens is, as we're driving, if the extra weight's here, it'll throw the tire like this, and then throw the tire like this, and it'll force that tire to do this and cause that scalloping. So sometimes that wear pattern on the tire is caused just by tire imbalance. So we take the tire off, we balance it, we've corrected the problem. But sometimes it's caused by worn components on the engine, and the symptom looks the same as what an imbalance looks like. So sometimes it can be caused by some of these steering and suspension components that are worn. So here we have a ball joint, which is a ball and a socket, and it's supposed to move together, but if it's shaking and moving like this, right, that's allowing that tire to jump back and forth like this a little bit as it drives, and it'll make that same wear pattern, okay? Similarly, if we look here, okay, there's our tie rod end, so that's part of the steering. So that's connected to the rack and pinion steering, and when I steer, I move this in and out, which turns this spindle right here, which allows that tire to turn. But if this ball and socket or that taper up there is wiggling and got some shake to it, that tire can wiggle and shake, like as if I'm shaking that steering wheel as I'm going down the road, right? And the road force is going to just make it vibrate, and it'll give it that same wear pattern. So if you have some tires that are wearing like that, it's very important to check some of these things, okay? Another thing can be the wheel bearing. The wheel bearing's got play, and it jumps back and forth. So we want to be able to check some of those things. Now, you can do this fairly easily if you have a high enough vehicle that you can look at it. So one easy way to do it, to check tie rod ends in the steering, is have somebody just shake the steering wheel. And they'll shake the steering wheel back and forth, and if this thing is moving with this together, and that ball and socket, it all looks like it's moving as one unit, you're fine. But if you get sort of some separation, and it clunks and then moves and clunks and then moves, that's what we don't want. Okay, so that's something that you can look for there. Now, if you can take a pry bar, now this is a lot easier on a hoist, but you know, if you have a truck or something that's taller, sometimes you can get in and do it yourself. But if we can get in here like this and pry between these components, right, and then look and see if we've got any play or movement. Okay? So is that popping? Is it moving? Can we move it up and down? And it's also important to jack the tire up, and then you can go underneath the tire and lift up on the tire with a big bar, like a 6-foot bar or a piece of pipe or something, and see if you can get any movement. So just try and pry everywhere you can, see if you can get things to move and shake. When it's jacked up, like if you're changing a tire, that's always a good time to check, just to give that tire kind of a shake and see if you feel any play as well. Okay, so you can shake on this side, see if you feel play here. You can shake on the bottom, see if you feel ball joint play. Grab both sides and see if you can feel hub play or wheel bearing play. Okay, so that's sort of how we would check those components out, just to make sure if we have this abnormal cupping wear that it's not a component causing it, when we think it's just tire imbalance. So a lot of times people will just balance the tires and say, yep, that's the cause, and they miss some sort of a front end component like that. That's it.